History teaches us that power always wins, that the strongest army always conquers. But in the year 1288, the most powerful empire on earth was stopped by a river. In the 13th century, the Mongol Empire ruled the world. From China to Eastern Europe, cities fell one by one. Resistance meant destruction, surrender meant survival. Under the leadership of Genghis Khan and his descendants, their dominion stretched across Asia and into Europe, creating the largest contiguous land empire in history. Their military tactics were revolutionary, their cavalry unmatched. They built an empire on speed, discipline, and a reputation for absolute ruthlessness. No empire had ever truly stopped them, until they turned south. South of China lay a small kingdom, Jai Viet, modern-day Vietnam. It had no massive walls like the great cities of the north, no endless armies to match the Mongol hordes. What it did have were dense jungles, winding rivers, and a sweltering, unforgiving heat that could break the spirit of any invader. This land, beautiful yet treacherous, would become the ultimate test for the world's greatest conquerors. Vietnam's defense was led by one man, General Tran Hung Giao. Born in 1228 into the royal family, he was not just a warrior, but a brilliant strategist. He understood something that few of his contemporaries did. You do not fight the Mongols directly. You don't meet their strength with your own. You let them defeat themselves. His philosophy was one of patience, of using the land itself as a weapon, and exploiting the enemy's own momentum against them. In 1258, the Mongols invaded Vietnam for the first time. Following Tran Hung Giao's strategy, the Vietnamese forces executed a tactical retreat. They abandoned their capital city, Thang Long, what is now Hanoi. To the Mongols, it looked like an easy, swift victory. They marched into an empty city, unopposed. But this victory was a hollow one. There was no food to plunder, no supplies to capture. The unbearable heat, combined with the unfamiliar tropical diseases, began to take a heavy toll. The Mongol army, accustomed to the open steppes, was slowly being ground down by an invisible enemy. Eventually, weakened and starving, they were forced to withdraw. Vietnam had survived the first wave, but the Mongols were not an empire that accepted defeat. In 1285 they returned, this time under the command of one of Kublai Khan's sons. They were stronger, angrier, and determined not to make the same mistake twice. Once again, Vietnam's army retreated, seemingly melting into the landscape. And once again, the land itself fought back. Guerrilla warfare erupted from the jungles. Supply lines were cut. The heat, the humidity, and the constant ambushes wore down the invaders' morale. After several hard-fought battles where the Vietnamese forces bled the Mongol army dry, the invaders were again forced to retreat. The final and most ambitious invasion came in 1287. This time, the Mongols brought not just a massive land army, but also a huge naval fleet, intending to secure their supply lines by sea and conquer Vietnam once and for all. They believed this two-pronged attack was foolproof. Victory was certain. They were wrong. Tran Hung Giao knew he couldn't win a conventional battle against such overwhelming force. He had to set a trap. A trap so perfectly timed and brilliantly conceived that it would turn the Mongols' greatest strength, their numbers, into their greatest weakness. He chose his ground carefully, the Bac Giang River, a place of historical significance where a similar tactic had defeated a Chinese fleet centuries earlier. Under his orders, Vietnamese soldiers and local villagers worked tirelessly. They planted thousands of massive, sharpened wooden stakes deep into the riverbed, their tips coated with iron. At high tide, these stakes were completely submerged, invisible beneath the murky water. At low tide, they would become a forest of deadly spears. The plan was set in motion. A small flotilla of Vietnamese ships sailed out to meet the Mongol fleet. They engaged in a brief, fierce skirmish, then abruptly turned and fled up the river. The Mongol commander, seeing the smaller force retreat, took the bait. Eager for a decisive victory, he ordered his entire fleet to pursue them. The massive warships sailed confidently into the mouth of the Bac Giang River, right on schedule. It was April 9th, 1288, high tide. The Mongol fleet pushed deeper and deeper into the river, chasing the seemingly panicked Vietnamese boats. Then, just as Tran Hung Giao had calculated, the tide began to fall. The water level dropped quickly, The massive, heavy Mongol ships began to slow down, their deep hulls scraping the river bottom. Then they stopped completely, trapped in the mud. And as the water receded, the stakes emerged from the river, a terrifying, silent army rising from the depths. Panic erupted. The huge ships were impaled on the stakes, their hulls pierced like paper. Vietnamese fire rafts, which had been waiting in ambush along the riverbanks, were launched, setting the trapped ships ablaze. Chaos consumed the Mongol fleet. Ships crashed into each other, wood splintered, sails burned, and the river became a battlefield. And then, a watery grave for thousands of invaders. The mighty Mongol fleet was annihilated. It wasn't destroyed by a larger army or superior weapons, but by intelligence, patience, and a deep understanding of nature. It was one of the most stunning and decisive defeats in Mongol history, a humiliation that shattered their aura of invincibility. The Mongols never launched a full-scale invasion of Vietnam again. An empire that had conquered continents, that had brought kings and emperors to their knees, had been stopped. Stopped by timing, by patience, by a river, and by the genius of one man. Tran Hungjiao died in the year 1300. He is revered to this day as a national hero and one of the greatest military strategists in world history. He is remembered not for the lands he conquered, but for the home he defended. He proved that true strength isn't just about power. It's about the wisdom to know when and how to use it. The Mongols conquered the world, but Vietnam taught them a lesson. Not every empire falls to violence, some fall to intelligence. And if stories like this matter to you, you know where to find more. Thanks for watching.